I do not condone or endorse the use of illegal substances. This video is a story of my own experience. Please use this for entertainment purposes or information regarding psychedelic use and harm reduction.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to Detox Proxy. The biggest video, or the most viewed video on this channel, is definitely the one titled "This 4-gram trip scrambled my brain like an egg." Even though it had a very catchy title, that trip was no joke. I've never tried those same white rabbit psychedelic mushrooms ever since then until now. Now, I've had these mushrooms sitting on my shelf for over 2 years now, and I literally just could not bring myself to actually try them again. I've been through some really deep and challenging trips, but those white rabbits were so strong that they really did make me think that I poisoned myself that last time around. These things intimidated me quite a bit. I didn't want to spend half the day, staring at my washroom floor, slipping in and out of consciousness, if you know what I mean. With these mushrooms sitting in a jar on my shelf for 2 years, I really expected the potency level to lower quite substantially, especially compared to freshly dried mushrooms that just went into the jar. This trip I had planned ahead of time. I decided on the winter solstice, mainly because it fell on a Sunday. It was a good day for me to trip, but I felt the significance of the solstice may affect the trip a little bit. I prepared the mushrooms the way I have been normally this last little while by dusting them in the grinder and adding them to a meal. And this time around, it was the Western sandwiches again, so I just put the dusted mushrooms in with the eggs, beat them up, green pepper, ham, onto some sandwiches. The meals that I have initially don't significantly affect the trip at all. It seems to be glorified on the internet that taking magic mushrooms on an empty stomach is the way to go, but I tend to disagree. Certainly the lead time on an empty stomach is going to be much quicker. You're going to hit that trip a lot faster, but eating with mushrooms or eating afterwards or beforehand is not going to dilute the experience. That certain amount of chemical is going to enter your body, and there's nothing, eggs are not going to dilute that chemical. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. You're going to have the same experience, maybe just not as fast. What I will say from my own experience is, if you want to increase the lead time or come up time to your trip, take those mushrooms and add them to a soup and heat up the soup. They'll start breaking down in the soup. Or put them into a grinder and grind them to dust and add them to a meal. That psilocybin will be absorbed to your body twice as fast.
I gotta say, I make a pretty damn good sandwich. Bro, I don't know. I'm just getting to the end of the sandwich, the second sandwich. And I think I feel these things already kicking in. Hopefully this isn't more than I asked for today. I need to be a little bit functional.
Now, I really forgot how sedated I got the first time around taking these mushrooms, and it seemed like the same thing was starting to happen again. As the euphoric feeling started to come over me after eating, I started to get the feeling like this could be headed in a worse direction than what I had initially intended, but I knew I just had to hold on for the ride. So I am going to try and give updates throughout this trip. I'm just probably about 45 minutes after eating. I am really starting to feel the effects come on. I remember the amount of sedation I went through last time, and that is really starting to come over me a little bit. Just wanting to slump down into the couch here. I feel a little bit of temperature rise around my face. Yeah, I'm just kind of waiting to see where this might go. If it's going to be the same as last time, I might not update as much. And I do have to jump in the shower at some point because I haven't showered yet today anyway. And that might change things up as well. But so far so good. It's not hitting me as abruptly as it did last time. And I may have quite a bit more functionality. So it's about half an hour after that last video clip that I made. And these things are sedating me so badly that I almost fell asleep. I went into some kind of dream state here sitting on the couch, getting lost in my thoughts, but not as chaotic as the first time I took these things. So it is a little bit more manageable. I keep on having this idea someone's at the door and I need to keep on checking the door. But I'm thinking of jumping in the shower just because it'll
help me gather my thoughts, and we'll actually see where this trip might end up going. I think things might get a little bit crazier towards the climax, like they were early on in that last White Rabbit trip that I had.
I know I've mentioned before how good a shower feels during a trip. You know, it's that just the hot water hitting the skin and the sound of the water hitting the floor of the tub and whatnot. It's just like a sensory overload. And some of the wildest visuals that I've actually had were while I was standing in a hot shower on psychedelics.
While I was in the shower, I closed my eyes for a while, just letting the hot water beat down on me. Well, I started like slipping out of, slipping my consciousness a little bit and maybe daydreaming. But it was like entering another dimension there for a while. And then when I'd open my eyes, I was getting a lot of motion blur or double vision. And I just realized, okay, maybe it's time to get out of the shower. I feel so sedated, like I just keep on wanting to go to sleep. So I'm thinking that's what I'm gonna end up trying here. I'm just gonna lay down on the couch, get some blankets, make sure I'm nice and warm. Maybe I'll get some closed eye visuals going, or maybe I'll end up falling asleep. I'm not quite sure, but it's been a really interesting trip. These things are really powerful. You can't just accidentally take like a quarter or fucking 10 grams of them, because this is what 4 grams does. Wow.
My intent in laying down was just to calm myself and maybe get some closed eye visuals going. I decided that, if I fell asleep, it wasn't going to be too big of a deal, but it's something that's never happened to me before. I've never, ever fallen asleep on psychedelics. And I think that is part of the medicinal value of the mushroom. It pushes you to go lay down. It pushes you to go relax and close your eyes and just take in the experience.
Okay, so that was a little different. I guess I got, kind of through the climax of things, and I didn't really fall asleep, but just laying down there for quite a while, I wasn't really getting closed eye visuals, but more introspection than I thought I would actually get. So I just started kind of swimming through my thoughts. And one thing that really stood out and came to me was not that, I was put through child labor or anything like that, but how much I had to go work with my father or in place of my father at times, because around my age now, my father had certainly gone through a heart attack and possibly a second heart attack by this time. So, there's points where he was in the hospital, and this is at 16, 17 years old, and just his contracted type work is something that me and my brother picked up and filled for him while, he was in the hospital and recovering and whatnot. I would go work most summers with my father. I would put in like a whole summer, and then I would get like something at the end of the summer. I would, kind of put in a special request for something. I was like 13 or 14 years old. I convinced my father to go down to the hunting supply store and buy me a pellet rifle, which turned out to be a small mistake later on. That might have to be another story I tell for another time. But then it was like the following year, or maybe like 2 years after that, and Mortal Kombat 2 for Super Nintendo had, been released, and it had all the best parts of the arcade game within the Super Nintendo game, including all the blood and special moves and fatalities and whatnot. So it's just a game I had to have. And this kind of just puts it in perspective of the cost of software over the years. So that game was like $79.99 or $89.99. It was just because it was a fresh release, and they were just stinging people's parents back then. And it kind of went through my mind how the video game and software industry really took advantage of a lot of those people back then to kind of build what the gaming industry is today. Like, I built myself a ROM emulator system here. I have Mortal Kombat 2. I probably have the arcade version. I have the Genesis version. I have the Super Nintendo version. Anyways, I was glad to come back to reality, because I've got to move the one vehicle
that's all frost covered and snow covered out of the driveway into the garage because I'm taking it to work tomorrow. Being the winter solstice, I'm sure we're going to be losing light here in a little bit, so I've got to start that thing up and get it warmed up and get some of that stuff off of it before pulling it into the garage, because I mean then it's just a wet mess in there. And then I was thinking, I keep on getting back to all these comments I keep on getting from that epic 14-gram mushroom trip video, because they just keep on coming in. But yeah, it's time to get a little productive. Probably what didn't help the situation either was hitting a bowl of THCA diamonds right before I ended up laying down. That kind of sent my head for a spin. I'm just remembering that. Getting beyond the climax of the trip without anything crazy happening really allowed me to start to chill the fuck out. I had, succeeded in this 4-gram challenge that I put towards myself. And even though these mushrooms weren't as potent as the first time I took them, they absolutely require the respect of explorers. I'm all finished eating, and I'm just sitting here watching Rick and Morty. And just watching that last episode, I just realized, like, there's no wonder I'm so screwed up watching shows like this, right? This trip turned out substantially different from the first time I took the white rabbits, and it really goes to show that the shelf life of mushrooms has a huge effect on the potency of them. If it's something that's been sitting around for a couple of years, is not going to be comparable to something that is freshly dried. And even the ones I have, I'm still going to be very cautious going beyond that 4 or 5 gram level with them. Something I'm going to get into eventually, just maybe not for a couple months. Heading forward, I've never done a trip report on a psychedelic tryptamine analog before. I have a couple of them in my psychedelic stash, and I know they aren't going to be as popular as psilocybin magic mushrooms, although chemically in the body, they are very, very similar. So make sure to come back and have a look for future trip reports, and check out some of my other content if you're into camping and fishing. I have some much bigger plans set out for this channel this year as far as content goes, as we get closer to 1,000 subscribers. Please be safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one.